For now, we have to move on to topic 3, and this involves Alex Pereira. The former UFC middleweight champion officially pulled the trigger on a move to 205, announcing his plans for the future on his YouTube channel this past week. Is this the correct decision for his career at this point? And who should he make his divisional debut against, guys? Taking into account that Dana White said on Saturday that it will not be a title shot against Jamal Hill, kind of putting together a bow on that Glover Teixeira circle there that we saw when Hill won the belt, and he'll have to face a, quote, real guy before he is considered for a title shot. So, George, if you are the UFC matchmakers Mick Maynard, how do you handle Alex Pereira at 205 for his divisional debut?
I would probably, I think Alexander Rakic should be coming back right about now, and I would like to see him against somebody like Alexander Rakic or Yuri Prochazka. It's just that I think Yuri Prochazka probably is closer to the front of the line of fighting for the title. So that, and I just took one of the two from the guys. Sorry, guys. So I'll stick with Alexander Rakic. I think that would be an excellent fight for both guys. I do like Pereira's move up because he's not letting the UFC or Israel dictate his next move. He's kind of making his next move. And remember, he can always come back. In fact, he said it on his YouTube channel, 185, not a problem. Was he one of the last to weigh in? Yeah, but he still made it. So he says it won't be a problem. He'll still be able to get back to 185 and at least have a hand in dictating the terms. Because think about it. This guy's got to have an ego too, man. They're 1-1. They both knocked each other out, except he has that history in kickboxing. So even though he didn't get the last dub, he's still, like I say, has a little bit of pride in the fact that in that Izzy Pereira series, he's kind of up on the guy. So right now he's going to try and maybe get another title. Maybe that'll be his way of saying, hey, look what I did with and Izzy couldn't. And again, I'm not trying to rub salt in Izzy's wounds. That dude's a stud. I'm just saying I'm trying to get myself into the head of Poatan and maybe what he's thinking. Who knows? Because look, they come out here on their YouTube channel and they say the right things, but in the gym they're saying, yeah, this, I'm going to clown him, I'm going to fuck him up, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. You know, that's the way fighters are. They present themselves in a different way, save for a few of those gangsters like the Diaz brothers and a few others. But I think that's what Potang is kind of feeling right now.
And folks in the comments, if you have any suggestions for who you'd like to see Alex Pereira fight at 205, make sure to drop them in and maybe we'll give it a shout if you come up with a good idea. But next up to Goes, I mean, what do you think? Do you like this Alexander Rakic suggestion by your bro here, or do you think there's a better option for his debut?
Yeah, it's not bad. I mean, there's definitely more options, in my opinion, to get him going at 205 than there are at 185. So I kind of like Johnny Walker. I think that's a guy that's going to stand in front of him and want to test himself. They're going to stand and bang. But really, after a while, like, how many of these guys are going to just sit there and stand and trade with the guy before they resort to some wrestling, which is what we feel like was waiting for him at 185, right? You got these guys up at 205 that are going to want to implement that same game plan. So whoever it is, we got to hope that Alex Pereira makes the adjustments that he needs to be able to contend with some of these guys. But I feel like a guy like Johnny Walker, it would be an interesting fight. I think it would be a fun fight. And I think it does give Alexander Pereira a little bit more of an advantage as far as a guy that's going to want to really go toe-to-toe with you for a while and give you those moments where you can maybe get that knockout.
Yeah, Me Diamond 44 in the comments suggests Alex Pereira versus Jan Blachowicz, which could be an interesting one, but what's going to happen with Jan Blachowicz? He teased after the title fight, maybe he wants to go down to 185 and have a rematch with Israel Adesanya there. I don't know if it's possible for this man to make 185. He's 40 years old and has never done it before, and he's pretty damn chiseled as it is as a light heavyweight. So I don't know if that was just, in jest, but if he does do that, I think that creates an interesting situation for Adesanya, but we'll get to him in a moment. Dan Tom, what do you think of these ideas? And I want to ask you as well, how do you think Pereira's skill set fits in at 205? I mean, was the whole debate about him, right? Like, against anyone but Adesanya at middleweight, how would he do against the Vittoris, the Whitakers, and stuff like that? Do you think some of these 205 contenders are a better fit for his skill set? Is he even going to be able to beat one of these real guys, as Dana says, to get a title shot there?
I think he can. Simply put, is that there's less wrestlers at 205 and at heavyweight. I think 205 and even heavyweight, Alex Pereira would do much better than he did at middleweight, where he actually got the title. I know there was some kind matchmaking there, and that's ultimately what we have to have a question answered as far as Pereira's wrestling. Blachowicz would answer that, but I don't like that. I like the Rakic and Walker ideas. Those were going to be mine. What else was going to be mine was going to be Dustin Jacoby if he won this past week. Unfortunately, he did not, and I wasn't really having my hopes banked on that because I actually picked against him this last weekend. But, there was a little bit of history there. That would have been a classic UFC matchmaking route. But I went on the record of saying this before. I've got a ton of respect for Jamal Hill, despite picking against him in his last fight. I have even more respect after seeing his ground and pound and the potential there. But even with that being said, I still felt like his hardest matchups, and people gave me a lot of crap for this, was Jan Blachowicz and potentially Alex Pereira, who, when I said this at the time, had no intentions of moving up. He was still the middleweight champion. Not only is there a revenge plot there that the UFC could also build off of, avenging your former master. You could go up to 205, avenge all of Glover's losses. But the left hook in particular, left-sided shots have really marked up Jamal Hill, even in his victories. Even when he iced OSP to when he won the title against Teixeira, left hooks. And who has the most dangerous left hook in any division? That is Poatan Pereira, who has an underrated left hook that was able to beat Adesanya. Well, that's Jan Blachowicz. So those two guys are the top threats. So I don't want to see Jan Blachowicz move down for that reason. And I don't want to see, yet again, two of my favorite contenders, two of the arguable best contenders for a division, having to face each other. So do not do Blachowicz versus Pereira. I would probably see a Volkan Ozdemir versus Pereira if you're going to make me guess.
Scott Ryan in the comments says, let Paul Craig turn him into a pretzel. And that's on the 30-year anniversary of the UFC. That's probably as old school style versus style as you could possibly get. Alex Pereira versus Paul Craig. So maybe Nick Maynard feels like doing something funky and going down that road, but we'll see. But kind of the repercussions of this move up, and Pereira didn't completely close the door on 185, but I want to ask you, given this move, given Adesanya's more or less dismissal, saying if Pereira was going to stay at 185, he needs to go do the hard road work and stuff, are you worried we might never get this MMA trilogy between these two now, between Pereira and Israel Adesanya?
Yeah, man, I don't think it's going to happen. Like I said, I mean, in both divisions, there just seems to be a little bit of kryptonite there waiting for Alex Pereira. We'd have to see how much better he gets from fight to fight. But we're asking him to make strides in one of the most difficult areas in mixed martial arts. So to see that happen another time, I mean, unless it happens in slap fight or something like that, I don't think it's going to happen in MMA.
Yeah, what do you think, George?
Well, I think they will, because it's too big of a fight for it not to happen. And, somebody in the chat threw out a comment. I can't find it right now, but somebody said, here it is. C3 says, how about the Izzy rematch at 205? Well, I suppose if we're giving Pereira the fast track and he does fight a Rakic, who injured his knee about a year ago, that's why I said I think he might be, getting ready to come back. Well, he's going to be kind of like one or two fights away from a title shot. And that would be pretty gangster of Izzy to come up to fight him to try and get a second belt and to settle the MMA trilogy. So there's a possibility there. There's a possibility of Paul Craig does pretzel up Pereira, if that fight were to happen. And Pereira goes, man, maybe I don't want a part of this. Izzy's gone down and had a few fights and cleaned the division up. Let's just get this trilogy out of the way. I just think there's just so many possibilities where it can happen. Therefore, I think it will happen. And by the way, Paul Craig turned Jamal Hill into a pretzel, if you recall, and then he goes and wins 4 more and becomes world champion. So that reality check, a wrestler beating you up or a jiu-jitsu guy putting you into a pretzel, sometimes it's also good for you, because guess what? You address that hole, and the next thing you know, you can stop it from happening again, and you become better. So I'm not totally against that either. Although Hill's 31, I think Shaheda's a few years older, so that was at least earlier in his career.
Yeah, and as FaZe says in the comments here, Poatan has a difficult road ahead now. No matter what division he's in, it's going to be tricky here. The Israel Adesanya stuff, his backstory led him to these title shots, but now it's time to find out, what the real deal is in terms of his actual skill. And just to close out this topic with you, Dan, given all this, we are not going to get the Adesanya fight right now, it seems. So what do you do with Izzy? Dana White said on Saturday at the press conference that pretty much days after his win, he's been hitting up the UFC brass saying he wants to get back in there. He teased it could be before the end of the summer. So what do you think the next 185 title fight should be if they're not doing Adesanya versus Pereira 3?
Man, that is a left turn question. If Izzy's wanting to stay busy, I'm not sure if he's wanting to stay busy up a division or not. But down a division, he's actually got, the garden is getting watered as far as contenders. You've got Khamzat Chimaev, of course, is a big name. Obviously, Adesanya probably would want him to, and the Gen Pop would want him to, establish himself a little more before getting that, a title shot at 185. You've got Bo Nichols, speaking of wrestlers. So you have these guys that maybe are not the greatest stylistic matchups once those blossoms bloom. But the problem is they're still in the blossom stage, right? Let's be honest here. They have a ton of potential, but I don't know who's actually going to be right there. So I got thrown off guard. I was prepared to answer Poatan Pajeda, who has just been getting like mislabeled as a bully for his style and for going down to 185. But yeah, I don't think they're going to fight again. That's for sure. I think both Izzy and the UFC are trying to memory hole, even though it's 1-3 in the series, with Poatan being clearly ahead. Between the Arrow celebration to how it's kind of getting memory hold, they're just going to act like, Izzy won the whole series, and we probably won't see it again unless that 205 scenario happens that George beautifully laid out. But yeah, it's going to be slim pickings for Adesanya at 185 right now.
Yeah, pretty much the only people in the top 10 he has not fought yet that would be anyway logical would be Dricus du Plessis and Sean Strickland, both of whom would have some pretty dark lead-ups, I think, for a variety of different reasons.